Thanks for being our co-host today.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
Hi, Ann. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Heather. I'm in beautiful downtown Cloverdale this evening, so. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, Ed. Before we start, I want to tell you I used some of that smoked salt that you sent me, and oh my goodness,
It's
life-changing.
It was really good at the barbecue.
Life-changing.
Ed has a side job that he doesn't tell anybody about.
No,
What
that's
is that?
my son-in-law, and not in the ABC 17 area, smokes sea salt for barbecuing, and it's very, very good.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
That is very
Thank
cool.
you, Lisa.
Seriously, life-changing. So upped my foodie game, let me tell you. So upped it.
Well, I can give you guys some more. I've got to head down to Santa Maria here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So,
Well, honey, don't go out of your way.
well, thank you, Lisa. It's my pleasure, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So,
Yeah, I enjoyed it before my doctor told me, you're not eating salt, are you?
No.
I've had that same conversation, it seems. So,
I didn't tell her about you though, but anyway. But thank you. It was fabulous. My neighbor loved it, and the food I prepped it with, it's just all around fabulous.
well, for those that don't know, you're very kind because you cook for your neighbor, and that's a very good thing. So,
Yeah. And he's spoiled.
For those of you that are just joining us, we are going to begin our committee meeting in just a few minutes. And while you're waiting, please take a look at the slides that are toggling on the screen, which will show you how to access interpretation if you need it, or go into more detail about how you might make sure that your screen name is in the right order. So there's 2 slides showing. Feel free to rename yourselves if you need to, and or access interpretation. And we are here to help if you need it, anytime. It's like a lot of people joined earlier on, right on time or early today. It's awesome.
yeah.
And Ed, you said you need to sneak off a little early today, half an hour or so?
Yes, I'm going to have to jump off for a little bit. I have another meeting that I need to go to. As soon as the issues from that meeting are completed, I'll be back. So hopefully that'll be before the end of the meeting. But I'll be with them at the meeting, at least for the first part. And I apologize for that conflict of interest, but it was unavoidable. So
If you come back, just send us a message or say something and we'll bring you back in.
I mentioned to Jessica I would text her, and so you'll get to know Erica. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. We've got a pretty good group, and it is 5:30, so we are recording and on Facebook Live, so we can actually go ahead and get started. I want to make sure we've got all of our team members here from the Air District. And Ed, you're here. I think we're pretty close.
Good. Erica, could you post the agenda for us on the screen?
Yes, it's coming up in just a couple slides. Do you need it right this second? Hannah can show it right now.
No, that's fine. In a couple.
Okay, yes, we have a slide for it. Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right, well, let's get started. So hello and welcome to the AB 617 South Central Fresno Community Steering Committee meeting. My name is Erica Manuel and I'm the CEO of the Institute for Local Government, or ILG. ILG has been working with the Air District and the community to facilitate this steering committee meeting for the past year. And as always, it's fantastic to see you all today. I am not Hannah Stelmakovich. Her name is listed on the agenda, but we are tag teaming as an ILG group today. And you'll see Hannah still here and Kim Danko as well. We are working as a team and they will be working behind the scenes to manage the logistics of this virtual Zoom meeting. So if they are waving or if they reach out to you via chat, that's why they are helping to rename people, make sure the screen names are appropriate, and answer any technical questions you might have. So before we go too far, I want to make sure that our Spanish-speaking attendees have everything they need to hear, understand, and participate in this meeting. So I'm going to check in with the Air District and our interpreters to share instructions in Spanish. Can you please provide those Spanish instructions and then let me know when we are cleared to proceed?
Ok, muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la reunión del AB 617. Nomás queremos saber si necesitan ayuda en la interpretación. Pueden entrar a la línea de español y eso está disponible si oprima el logotipo que tiene como un globo y ahí dice Interpretation, y si oprima ese botón va a tener la opción de inglés o español y oprima la selección de español para poder entrar en esa área. I think we're, let me double check because I was having some issues with the Spanish. I couldn't hear the Spanish. Just a moment.
Sí, ahorita sí te escuchamos. Yo te escucho, no sé las demás.
Ok, Lilia, cuando estaba en el canal de
Ya
español.
está bien. Ya está hablando Marisela, yo pienso que en inglés porque no la escucho a ella.
Ok. I think we're good.
Awesome. Thank you, Mari.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Now we'd like to quickly go over the agenda for today's meeting. It should be flowing on the slide. First and foremost, we're going to cover the topic that I think has been on everyone's mind for months. We're going to talk about stipends. So the district has really been working hard to find a solution to this stipend question. And so Ryan is going to give us an update on the progress with that effort. And then there are a few standing updates that the district's going to cover related to subcommittees and air monitoring results. Then we're going to have a discussion about the Air District's new tool to track the CERT measure development and implementation. And then specifically, we're going to talk about how best to track the progress moving forward. And then we're going to hear about the AB 617 update that CARB's going to be making at their September board meeting. And then last, we're going to wrap up this meeting by just brainstorming some agenda items that you want to see discussed in the future meetings. Today's agenda items were developed in partnership with this month's community co-host, Ed Ward. Ed, say hello.
Hello. Thank you.
And as always, we are so grateful to Ed, community co-host, and then other committee members who help make suggestions, who help prioritize topics that we want to discuss at this meeting. This is a community-led process, and I think your input, Ed's input, and others really help make this process work. So now that we've talked about the agenda, we have a few more people on the line. Let's go through the Zoom controls and the virtual meeting etiquette. We know this is not our first Zoom meeting, and I know you're getting really familiar with these controls, but we want to make sure we give a quick reminder about the etiquette for any members of the public or those of you who are on the line for the first time. So first things first, please make sure that your screen name includes your first name, your last name, and your organization, so we know who's on the line today. There was a slide earlier that showed how to change your screen name, and if you have any issues, feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat and we will help you. If you're a CSC member, an alternate, or a resident, please note that. If you're a district or CARB member, please note that. If you're a member of the public, we'd like to ask you to put a P at the end of your screen name, just so we know that you're a member of the public as well. If you are on the phone or you're otherwise unable to change your screen name, just let us know and we will do it manually. And my colleagues, like I said, Hannah and Kim, have controls to access that and can do it for you. Other etiquette things, if you could please stay on mute unless you are speaking or planning to speak. That's a big one. And if you could please raise your blue hand and ask a question verbally during the meeting, we will call on you to make sure that we don't have too much Zoom interference. Feel free to use the chat box to communicate questions or make a comment. And as a friendly reminder, that chat function is not completely private. Even the one-on-one private messages might be reflected in a chat transcript. So we just encourage, be kind and respectful in that chat. As you may have seen, this meeting's being recorded and streamed live on Facebook. The meeting is open to the public, but we do ask the members of the public reserve your comments to allow the CSC members some time to deliberate. We are going to make sure, though, that we check for public input and make sure that throughout the agenda that we see if there's any additional comments from the public. But there is a formal public comment section at the end of the agenda for those participating in Zoom and also on Facebook Live. As you might have heard, we also have a translation option for those who just joined. For those of you in our Spanish-speaking community, if you are on 2 devices, that translation option might be a little bit complicated, so just check with us and we're happy to help walk you through it. We, as I mentioned, are standing by to help you troubleshoot any options or issues that you have, particularly for our Spanish speakers, to make sure that you can access this meeting and participate as fully as possible. We will stop the meeting to make sure that you have the access that you need. So, down to basics, we are going to actually skip the verbal roll call during this portion of the meeting for the CSC members, but we do want to make sure that you update your screen name so we can track your attendance. Part of the reason why we go through that process is so we can see who's on the line, and when we go back through that transcript and we use that as an attendance log. If you are curious to see who's on the line today, go ahead and click on that participants icon, which should be on your screen if you're using a tablet, or on your screen even if you're using a phone. You can see who's on the line today. Please do make sure that your screen name says first name, last name, CSC. And again, the reason why this is important, and we're going to hear a little bit more about this, but as we continue to explore the possibility of stipends, this renaming process is going to be really important, and Ryan's going to talk to you about that in just a few minutes. So feel free to send us a note if you have any technical difficulties, and at this time, I'm done with the housekeeping parts, and I want to pass it over to your community co-host, Ed Ward. Ed, your turn.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this. I want to share with everyone in the committee that that this agenda doesn't represent particularly my views. It was developed within the community. Some of you actually provided some information that I reached out to find out what the concerns were, what we'd like to meet about, and I appreciate that input. Particularly that Erica mentioned, tonight we're going to talk about stipends, certainly a very important piece that we've been waiting for some information on for a while. But the other piece that I think is going to be very valuable for us this evening is CARB's interaction as we develop that report, the summary to CARB regarding our progress on our SEPs. So once again, I want to welcome everyone that's here. I want to thank you for your participation, and I look forward to a strong meeting with lots of interaction. Thank you.
Ed. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to our host at the Air District. And Ryan, I think you're on the line. If you can give us this much anticipated update on the stipends. Ryan, you're up.
Good evening, everybody. I don't have much to follow up. I think Ed did a very wonderful and eloquent job of expressing our desire for a productive and another very good AB 617 meeting with the South Central Community Steering Committee. So I'm happy to give this update. I know it's a topic that many of you have had a lot of interest in, and that when this got brought up earlier in the year was definitely a topic that we took very seriously, that we were supportive of the concept of. And so kind of just got a little bit of the background on it. This was something that we believe that CARB, the California Resources Board, being the state agency in charge of the AB 6017 program, that they would take the lead on this and find a way to implement stipends and come up with formalized guidance that would apply throughout the state for this program for consistency reasons. And unfortunately, it came to the realization that they were not going to be able to do this in a timely manner, or if at all. And so I'm very thankful that we have an air pollution control officer who really values the participation of the steering committee members, especially those resident members. And so he immediately put us to the task of try to find a way to provide stipends to the resident members of the community steering committees. And so I'm happy to kind of go over what the possible structure for stipends would look like for the steering committees in the San Joaquin Valley. So as I mentioned, the people that would be eligible for the stipends would be the resident members of the steering committees, residents of the AB 617 communities who serve as residents on the committee. If a primary member was unable to attend and their alternate serves in their stead, that alternate member would qualify for a stipend for that meeting. The amount for the meeting would be $75 per meeting, up to a total of 15 meetings in a calendar year. And the stipend funding is definitely, it's subject to the availability of AB 61 funding on an annual basis. So one of the concerns was whether or not the district would be able to provide stipends retroactively. It was a topic of conversation. We believe we can do that going back to January 1st of this year. We do have a requirement for participation in the meetings. And so as Erica mentioned, with the roll call. So basically the expectation would be that anybody that is requesting stipends would have to be or participate in 75% of the meeting. So for example, tonight's meeting is scheduled for 2 hours. That means that the member would have to participate for an hour and a half of that meeting. It is a voluntary, not all residents are required to take a stipend. And so the process for requesting the stipends, we're very fortunate to have great facilitation services, which I'm sure all the community steering committee members appreciate what Institute for Local Government brings to the meetings. And they've agreed to step in and fulfill the role of providing the stipends to the resident steering committee members. So what would happen, the next step would be to get the approval from our board at our next meeting, which is August 20th, at which point the ILG would reach out to resident members and provide them the documents that they would need to submit in order to receive stipends. And they also have committed to providing stipends within 30 days of the scheduled AB 617 meetings. So that's my general overview. Really want to thank the steering committee members who have continued to raise this as an issue and worked with us, and we are very appreciative of you and your efforts. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. So at this time, I want to make sure we take any questions from the committee about the stipends. We did get one question in the chat about the amount of the stipends, and I think we heard you say it was $75 per meeting. Can you confirm that that's still the case?
Correct. And I should have said that that's for the regular community, community steering committee meetings, the regularly scheduled ones. It would not apply to the subcommittee meetings.
Excellent. If there are any other questions, please raise your blue hand, which is pressing *9 if you'd like to make a verbal comment, or feel free to insert your comment in the chat box. And I see Lisa's hand. Lisa, would you like to go?
Yeah, I got a real quick question. My question for you is, I'm listed as somebody from the business area, which is, great, fabulous. But my business is basically, I do consulting, and I haven't been able to accept any sort of consulting job because I do most of my consulting within the footprint of AB 617. Is there any way I can get a kickback of not a kickback, but is there any way I'm eligible for a stipend? Because I've lost, so far I've lost 1.5 years of income.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for that, Lisa. What we are following is basically the guidance that was put out. So what we have is we have a consultation working group that it's members of AB 617 communities, businesses, districts throughout the state, and this is from that kind of working together. This was the guidance that was put out that the ARB is looking to also adopt formalized guidance, and that it would only apply to resident members of communities.
Because as you know, I'm a very ethical person, and I don't believe being on a committee and then go making money within a footprint. That to me, just, I can't somehow, Anyway, all right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Are there any other questions on any of the lines, either the Spanish line or the English line? I don't see any other blue hands at the moment, or chat questions.
I do have one other
if
question.
you're happy with, oh, sure, go ahead, Lisa.
I have one other question. So this, so you only get the stipend for 15-minute meetings a year. So if any of the residents want to participate in the committee meetings, they're not eligible, they're only eligible for 15 and that's it?
Correct.
Or does that include the subcommittees?
So it would not include the subcommittee meetings. It would only include the regular community steering committee meetings.
Have you guys thought about having a stipend for the subcommittee meetings so they can actually participate maybe a little bit more as an incentive?
Yeah, and kind of going back to working with the kind of the state on this and the guidance that was being put out, that's really where this is coming from, and looking at what other districts that have already been providing stipends were providing. It's basically bringing us in line with what others are doing. Steering the subcommittees meetings have the potential to be a lot more flexible in the time and it takes for those meetings versus a steering committee where it's more set in stone. The time that's going to, and the participation and the time it takes to prepare for those meetings. Those are all the considerations that were put into.
Because I'm looking at this as we have 12 meetings a year, which are, great, fabulous, right? But, you're still taking away the residents from their kids, their families, their work and such to participate even in the subcommittees. And I'm thinking, even if you do a stipend for the subcommittees of even $25, I think that would be, it's better something than nothing, because we must really look at how do we encourage people to continue to participate. That's all.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that, Lisa.
Last chance for comments. Anyone else? And if you're generally happy or happy with this update, feel free to put in your reactions. Those are always helpful. Feel free to put in a thumbs up or a clap if you're happy about it. I haven't seen any other comments about not being happy with this general direction. So Ryan, if you can clarify, you have a board meeting in the next couple of weeks. I see some thumbs up and some claps. You've got a board meeting in the next couple of days, actually, and you'll have an update to them. What would you say timeline for the next update?
Yeah, so I think working with you, Erica, the next step would be if, assuming the board approves that, then ILG would work with the resident members to get them the documentation to submit to you to then receive those stipends.
Perfect. We are looking forward to working with you all on this process. We'll try and make it as seamless as possible and get things moving quickly. All right, so thank you, Ryan. We are moving on quickly. I want to make sure Kevin Hamilton's on the line. We did want to give him a chance to chat briefly. I don't see his name. Is Kevin on the line?
Don't? How about my
He's here.
face?
There you go. Excellent. We wanted to make sure that he has a chance to talk about some of the technology solutions he's been helping some of the CSC members with over the last few weeks and months, and give him a chance to update the committee. So if you are on the line, please unmute and talk and give us an update on what's happening with the group and any insights you might need from the team.
Sure, thank you, Erica, and thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to be sure and bring to the attention of the group that we have members, residents who may be challenged in participating in these meetings fully. That means with the ability to see and hear the meeting on an electronic device like a tablet, and to not be affected by the cost of doing that. We all know that data plans can be very expensive on phones, and budgets are very thin right now for every family out there, especially with COVID-19. And many of our residents are really stressed financially. So working with the Air District, we'd like to, CCAC and the Air District would like to offer those folks who need it some assistance with that. And so Central California Asthma Collaborative, in partnership with the Air District, would like to ensure all residents on the Community Steering Committee have the ability to participate and can participate in all the steering committee meetings and steering committee meetings, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but the subcommittee meetings in a meaningful way. If there are any residents who either do not have access to Wi-Fi or a free telephone connection in order to participate in these meetings, please let Heather Hanks or myself know as soon as possible so that we can assist you. We can provide you with Wi-Fi enabled tablets, including Verizon service, to ensure you always have access to these meetings. Again, simply inform Heather Hanks via email at heather.hanks@valleyair.org. That's heather.hanks@valleyair.org, or by phone at 1-559-230-5898. And if no one is able to pick up, leave a message and we will get back to you. And we want to help make sure that all residents can take advantage of this opportunity and fully participate in all of these meetings. So if anybody has any questions right now, please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, please either send an email or make a call and let us know. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Kevin. Sorry I didn't see your name a little earlier. Lisa has a question.
Will this be extended to the other communities also doing the AB 617? Because I know that I was yesterday in the nomination meeting. I attended that for a little bit, and I know they're thinking about going to Arvin, and I'm wondering, is this also expanded out to like the folks in Shafter and other rural communities as well? Oh, that's fabulous.
Yes, in fact, Shafter went first on this, and CCEJN led that effort down there, Lisa. So they have a lot more capacity down there. Naimeen works with a very limited group of folks up here, but down there they have more people. And so they were able to take that on, and CCAC can fulfill that role up here. And we're also willing to extend that up
Great.
after working with the Air District to make sure, but we're willing to extend that to the San Joaquin folks, San Joaquin County or Stockton folks as well.
This is going to be, this to me is like a game changer as far as, you know, community involvement. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Any additional questions? I know that if we need to, maybe I can ask Heather to put your email address in the chat just to make sure people know how to spell your last name. And we will make sure to track anyone that needs to sign up for that program that has not already. Thank you. All right. Moving on to the agenda, I don't see any hands. Actually, let me check quickly with the Spanish line. Do we have any comments from the Spanish line on anything that we have talked about so far before we move on?
I do not hear anybody on the Spanish conference line.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is when we're going to discuss some standing updates. We do have a few updates from the district today on the subcommittee work, as well as some recent community air monitoring results and updates. Jamie's actually going to start us off by sharing truck rerouting subcommittee and school filtration and bus subcommittee updates. Jamie, you have the mic.
Actually, before Jamie's going to share the school filtration, I do have Andy with the city who will actually share the truck rerouting subcommittee.
Perfect, even better, thank you.
Can I go ahead and just interrupt just briefly, because I did get a message in Spanish privately. If someone needs a, o si necesita una tableta, Lilia, ya sé que usted me preguntó acerca de si necesita o necesita una computadora, puede enviarme la información a mí y yo se la mando a Heather o a Kevin para que le puedan proveer la computadora. I was just basically stating that if any Spanish speakers needed the assistance from Kevin, they can message me and then I can provide that information to Heather or Kevin.
Thank you, Mari. Sorry, Jess.
Don't worry about it. Oops, Andy, I think you're on mute.
Yep, you're muted, Andy.
How about now?
You're good.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Bonelli with the City of Fresno. I wanted to talk a little bit about our truck routing study. For anyone who hasn't been at the last meetings or is not aware of this, this is a study of the current truck routes and looking at alternative truck routes throughout the whole area, not only in the city, but some in the county also. And we are teaming with the Air District, sharing in the cost and working to hire a consultant to do the truck route study. We've been preparing a document, it's called a request for proposals, that we will send out to all the consultants that would be qualified for this type of work. And from that, we'll give them a certain amount of time to return a proposal to us. And we have the request for proposals completed. We're just routing it now with our attorneys, with our purchasing department for their comments. But maybe I'll go over some of the tasks that we're looking at. We're looking at task 1 would be project management. Task 2, outreach and engagement, and that includes not just a public outreach, but it's key stakeholder engagement outreach. They'll be looking at the existing conditions and also making recommendations on modifications to the truck routes. They'll be looking at a lot of the project will include traffic counts, not just the trucks, but the cars, pedestrians and bicycles also throughout the area. They'll be looking at accident history, quite a bit of different information. And there are firms that specialize in this that have a lot of experience. So we're hoping to get some good proposals. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Feel free to raise your blue hand or put in the chat if you have any questions for Andy. It looks like Ivanka, would you like to go?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to ask, are you going to be able to provide this back to the committee before it actually goes out?
We will. We're just routing it internally right now to get comments from our different departments. When we complete that work, then we'll be providing it to the subcommittee for comments. And it's still a draft. I'm sure there'll be some edits from internally and also from the subcommittee.
All right, thank you.
Bill Jensen, I see your hand. Would you like to go next?
Who did you call on?
Bill, if you are talking, it looks like you might need to get off mute.
Okay, my question is to the City of Fresno person. Will the study take into consideration the advent of new interchanges at North Avenue, Central Avenue, and American Avenue to somehow figure out how much the traffic will be increased on those the existing truck routes when those interchanges are developed? We had a person from Caltrans at a previous meeting this last year, and they were, if I understood them correctly, and I may not have, that there are plans to put new interchanges at North Avenue, American Avenue, and Central Avenue. So I was curious if the advent of those new big interchanges, what type of more stress will that put on the existing truck routes, in the North and Jensen Avenue areas? That was my question.
Been working on with Caltrans on designs for new interchanges, although they're not, the design is funded or the studies are funded. We don't currently have funding for construction, and they've dropped Central from the list. They initially were studying the 3 interchanges, and they've dropped Central, and now they're just working on American and on North. And North is in the city, American's in the county. So my involvement is primarily with the North Avenue interchange. They have developed several different alternatives. This is really to address the current traffic conditions, but future too. It would be a larger interchange. So I would say, I don't think we'll have necessarily the design for the new interchange selected when the truck route study is done, but they will be looking at increases in traffic, not just from the current development, but the undeveloped lands too. We anticipate that at least some of this property will develop either residential, commercial, or industrial, and the volume of trucks will certainly increase. So that's a big part of the study.
Yeah, I would think particularly with that new interchange, it would put a lot more truck traffic in that area.
It may. Typically, the construction of the interchange is to address the traffic that's coming from development. It's really the development that drives the traffic more than the interchange. Nobody's going to use an interchange unless it gets them to a destination or gets them onto the freeway. You may have some changes. Somebody who maybe was going to use Jensen would choose to use North instead because of a better interchange. But usually they're going to go to the closest interchange unless they know there's a problem with traffic at that interchange. Which right now I think all of them have problems with traffic, my opinion.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Bill. All right, Lisa, you're up next.
I have 3 questions. My first question is, you were talking about American being in the city, which is fabulous, but North is in the county. Will your RFP, or do I have it backwards?
American's in the county.
Oh, American's in the county?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. So America's in the county, all right. Will your RFP be looking at, I'm sorry, I'm talking in acronyms. Will your request for proposals look at American Avenue from the scope of being in the sphere of influence?
We are asking them to include not necessarily the existing trucks on American Avenue, more so we may be rerouting some of the existing truck routes into county areas. So yes, but they need to include the county areas that are influenced by our truck traffic.
Okay, then my second question is, will the RFP be looking at the 10 and 20 year build out and life cycle?
Yes. And
Okay.
that's pretty standard. A 20-year
Then
build out is pretty typical.
okay. I asked that because a lot of the committee doesn't understand that. I'm old hat at it. Then my third question, does the request for proposals also include greenways? Are they also looking at, we're looking at traffic, but we're also looking at how can we reduce and make the air quality better by providing greenways and planning along the way and buffers?
You know, it's something we could consider. The current draft version doesn't really ask for that in their scope of work. But it's something, I mean, it's a truck study. The city does have a plan already for bike routes, trails. It's our active transportation plan. And that addresses bike routes. There's really 4 different classifications of bike facilities, from a full on trail to an on-street trail and protected bike lanes. There's a lot of different information there. So I think we would want them to evaluate if there's bike lanes on the road, how those might be impacted by trucking, especially if they're proposing a different truck route. You know, what are the conditions that are there now? Are the trucks going to be able to operate without impacting the bicycle riders or pedestrians? So I guess the answer is partially as a yes and partially as a no.
Well, I'm not asking only about bicycles. I'm asking also about greenways as far as providing buffers of setbacks and such, and also, you know, areas of vegetation.
That isn't included in the current request for proposals, but it's still a draft, so we could consider adding that.
Yeah, because I missed the original truck meeting because I wanted to bring a bunch of that type of stuff up. But I look forward to seeing your draft and reviewing it and forwarding my comments to you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Lisa. Denise Furry, you're up. Do you have a
Hi, thank
question?
you. Yes, you mentioned that you would include considering accident history. And so I'd like to know if you will be considering or providing public health data that addresses the cumulative pollution burden that would be a public health concern for wherever you relocate or wherever you recommend rerouting trucks. Would you consider the cumulative pollution burden that already exists in so many of the communities that we're talking about? And will you be including any public health data as a way of framing and providing context for what makes sense and what are the priorities that communities have?
I know that was discussed also at the subcommittee. I'm not sure if you were there, but this is not the first we've heard of that. I think it is important.
I keep bringing it up.
Yeah, I mean, we think it's important. I would guess that the prime consultant that would be doing the work may not have the background to do that, and they may need to get a consultant to do that work. I mean, some of these firms are large firms that may have a lot of different branches, but it seems like it'd be a different area of expertise than a company that specializes in truck routing. I do think it's important, but it may take a little bit different consultant to do that work. So we are going to include that in the RFP and see what kind of proposals we get, and what the cost of that would be.
I'm sorry, did you say
Thank
that you would be including that? Did you say that you would be including that in the RFP?
We are going to include it in the RFP.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm not sure what kind of proposals we will get.
Thank you, Andy. I don't see any more questions or comments in the chat, but I do want to make sure we close this up with very specific details about how the committee can understand what the next process is for the RFP. So I know, Andy, you're in the process of reviewing that draft. At approximately what timeline will you be able to share this with the committee or the subcommittee? Do you have a sense of approximate days or weeks?
We do. About 30 days. It's being circulated now in the city for comments. So we anticipate getting that back. Still be a draft, but within 30 days, release it to the subcommittee for their comments. And then depending on how many comments they have and how long it takes to address those, we'd like to get it out to the consultants within 60 days if we could. May take a little longer with the subcommittee, especially with, having to do it all virtually. It takes a little longer.
Great, thank you. Last chance for questions or comments on this item before we move to Jamie on school filtration.
A real quick question. It's Lisa. I'm sorry, I was reading something else and I think I may have missed it. When is the draft RFP going to be out?
We plan to have it to the subcommittee within 30 days. Like to get it, release it to consultants within 60 days. That will depend a little bit on the comments we receive and how many meetings it takes to work through those comments. May take a little longer because they're have to work through virtual and emails, that sort of thing. So we'd like to release it within 60 days, maybe more like 90, depending on the amount of comments we get from the subcommittee.
What's your target date within the next 30 days to do this? So I can block some time. That's the only reason why I'm asking.
Our target is to release it to the subcommittee in 30 days, which would be September 12th.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. I do see one last straggling hand. Eric, can you take us away? And if you can, keep it pretty quickly, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, thank you for your presentation. But I wanted to offer, I guess I just needed a little bit of clarity. So the recommendations that were proposed by Dr. Curry specifically.
Eric, we might have lost you. I think we did lose him. It might have been well, I'll see if he jumps back on, we'll give him a chance to ask that question. I suspect it might have been around whether we'll be able to address the health outcomes issue in the RFP. And from what I understood, you said, yes, you will put it in the RFP, but you just don't know what the responses will be. So it's hard to know if the selected contractor will have that skill set, so you have asked for it, correct?
Yeah, we're anticipating that most of the proposals will be from traffic engineering firms, and they're not experts in health effects. So they may be able to get a sub-consultant that could do that work, or we may need to do some outreach to find a qualified firm that could do that work.
So this is Kimberly. I just want to say that if the consultants that we're hiring to do the truck reroute study doesn't have that skill set, then we might want to explore hiring another consultant to connect the public health aspect to this. It's very, very important because of the communities that we're representing here, that public health is connected to this.
We agree. I'm just not sure that the traffic engineers that do the truck study will have that expertise to do it, the quality type of work that we would want.
Understood, but if not, then we need to contract or find a consultant to be able to connect that, because that's the whole purpose of us wanting a truck reroute study, is to make sure that the public health aspect is connected to this, because the communities that we serve, they're dealing with all type of health determinants that are affecting them. So this is something that needs to be addressed in the RFP. So this is something that we need to explore. This is not like a might, this is something that we need to do.
Most traffic engineers would have the expertise to generate the amount of air pollution And they can look at the different components and by the miles traveled, they can, number of trucks, the miles traveled, they can work with the air district to determine what air pollution is generated by the trucks. But the health effects is going to be expertise that a traffic engineer doesn't have.
This is Ivanka. I just want to add to what, agree with and add to what Kim is stating. As long as that RFP is specifically written in there to these experts, that we cannot expect that they have that, because we don't want information from people that this isn't their expertise. But as long as it's written in that RFP that we are expecting that they would have the capacity to do actual sub consulting with somebody else. And then maybe we actually need to consider in this traffic study to have just more than one consultant based off of expertise. If it's too hard to combine it into a one package deal, that could be just fine. We have the Thrivance group that's working on the transformative climate communities for West Fresno already. They are a perfect match. One other thing we've discussed with the district also is making sure that any agency, whether it is the district or the city, that you guys are leveraging the expertise of this community committee, because there are folks, there are EJ organizations, and there are residents that have relationships that are trustworthy relationships with different agencies as well. So just take that into consideration. We know very clearly that the expertise of a truck reroute on the architectural engineering side, that is not their lane, and we don't want to push somebody into the lane that they don't belong in.
Thank you, Ivanka. I think we are hearing that there is some consensus among the city and the committee members that this is important to include and important to figure out how to get done. And then we can work through the nitty-gritty details, I think, in the subcommittee meeting. And as we look at this RFP draft, we're going to make sure we have enough time and that you all have enough input on this RFP. And it sounds like the city is very committed to that process. So Andy, thank you for that. And I want to move us along. And if you have additional comments on this, I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
I didn't get a chance to chime in, and I just want to mention.
Hold on one sec.
I just want to mention, this is Kevin Hamilton. There is a piece of software that is being used by the COG as part of the RTP SES project right now for what you need, Andy. Talk to Christine Kai over at the COG. She can help you out there. And you can add that component in to your existing RFP, and it's used by transportation planners across the state because we worked on adding points to their RTPs for these health indicators. So there is a tool, transportation planning people have access to it. It's accepted by the state, by Caltrans and the CTC. So it shouldn't be a really big deal for you to add that at all as a component. So, but you could check with her first just to confirm.
Thanks for that, Kevin. This is Eric. I think I was kicked out of the chat. But what I was hearing before I was removed from the chat is that I know that it sounds like the city hears us, some of the committee members, as it relates to the public health element being included in the RFP, but it doesn't seem like there's willingness. And I think those are two very different things. And so what I don't think people are hearing is that there's a full commitment from the city to include that in the RFP.
It actually is in the RFP. I think what's up for discussion, Eric, and you missed this because I think you got dropped off, is that they're not certain what the respondents will be. But we have heard that there are a number of solutions and that there's a potential that during the truck rerouting subcommittee meetings, for this subcommittee to really go in and work on this RFP, make sure it reflects your priorities and that it aligns with what the goals are for the outcome. And then fingers crossed, we get someone, and maybe it's a person or an contractor that you're familiar with for some of your other efforts, that will respond to this and be able to either sub on that effort or be able to deliver on what is expected from this RFP. So I think, based on what I've heard, we are good to go with at least the direction that we want to include this. We want to try and get it, and we want to make sure that if we don't, we have a plan B and a plan C. So I think that's something we'll talk about in the next subcommittee. And unfortunately, I do want to move us along so we don't keep you till 9 o'clock tonight. Thank you guys. This comment and this topic was really important. I know it's important to all of you. We agree. We are not going to let this slide. Andy, thank you for all of your input. I want to hand it over to the district staff, Jamie and Jess, for your other updates on school filtration and any other updates you've got.
Hi, everyone. On school filtration, we have a couple of updates. First of all, we set a second subcommittee meeting for August 25th at 4 p.m. and I hope to see many of you there. We also have done a little bit of research and have come up with basically a survey of questions that we want to ask schools. It includes, we've learned a lot about, at least I have, about kind of commercial / industrial / school air conditioning systems in the last week. Number of air conditioning units at each school, it might be dozens, which each of those units will have a filter on them. We want to know the age of the air conditioning unit, the location, are they on the roof, where are they, how do they get access, the manufacturer model and the size of the filter, the length, width, and height of those filters, the MERV ratings, how many filters each unit requires, current maintenance schedule. We think this is going to be a big one, both what is the current maintenance schedule and who services the HVAC system. We do think in some of these instances they have a third party kind of HVAC company that comes in and takes care of all of this for them. And that may end up being the folks that we work with as we look to get these new filters in schools. We're doing some direct outreach to really try and get some of these schools to come to the meeting on the 25th and find out who the best contact people are for this type of project. In tandem to that, our grants team is actually just going to mock up an application for this program that we can share with you all based on the CARB guidelines for how this funding gets used for school filtration systems. That's actually something that they've already released. So we're going to put an application together so that while we're doing this kind of inventory of schools, there may be schools that are ready to go, and we want to have that ready for them so they can just sign up and we can get it going. We also have a little bit of a discussion that we plan to have at the subcommittee meeting about where and when we might kind of reach out to school boards and or school trustees. We do, just as a reminder, have the a variety of different school districts in the South Fresno AB 617 community. We have Central Unified. We actually have reached out to them, both their assistant director of transportation and an assistant superintendent will continue to try and get their involvement in this. They have 4 schools that are within the boundary. Fowler Unified, we've reached out to their assistant superintendent of business. They actually only have Malaga within the boundary. We have Orange Center. We have reached out to them numerous times, both I've reached out to their principal / superintendent there. We had some initial interest from them, and I think they're one of those folks that has just been kind of overwhelmed with COVID because they originally said that they were going to be able to come to our last steering committee meeting, but they, of course, didn't make it. I should say subcommittee meeting. We then have Washington Unified, and I'm happy to see that Keith is at the meeting again today. And we talked to him about a variety of different things, and I appreciate his input. Some of the things he has said to us have guided some of this discussion. Actually, we do have a public charter school down Raisin City Elementary, and we've been trying to reach out to them. They're a little bit of a different school. We do not quite have them locked in yet. And then, of course, last but not least, we have a couple dozen schools in Fresno Unified. We've reached out to the executive director of maintenance and operations. Again, he did say that he was going to be at the last subcommittee meeting. Unfortunately, couldn't make it. So I think in many of these cases, it's they do want to participate. It's just, I think we're gonna have to ask them again and again. I think we're gonna have to survey them with this little list of, what did I say, about 9 questions, and then look for kind of where we have what I call the low-hanging fruit, folks that we can just immediately funnel in to applying for the grant, and then those schools that we may need to twist their arm a little bit more, or we may need to look at other alternatives, including in-school filtration systems, in-classroom filtration systems. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If you've got any questions, please raise your blue hand or drop something in the chat. It looks like Denise, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned the source of funding would be grants. Does any of this work fall under the CARES Act? And is there a movement or a plan to look at how this might affect students, and the fact that although they're not going to be physically in school now, in preparation for when they do return, this, looking at the ventilation system, seems like that would be consistent with some of the CARES funding and how we might utilize that more effectively.
Oh, thank you. Heather was just telling me I wasn't on. With the CARB funding, in some cases it pays 100% of these filters, but I do think in those instances where we may have schools that aren't the low-hanging fruit, they can't easily plug into the grant program, I think we will need to be looking at alternative paths for them to help them. You know, in some cases, it may be a whole, you know, they may need a whole, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, air conditioning system, you know, with new ducting and all of that. And in those cases, I think we're going to have to get creative and look where there might be opportunities to see, you know, are there alternatives? Is it in classroom filtration systems where there might be those alternatives? Our goal, just to let you know, there was a timeline. So we hope, fingers crossed, to start getting applications, you know, going in, I would say, the next 30 to 60 days. And then those systems being installed, you know, shortly thereafter. I think for what I'm calling the low-hanging fruit, I think the turnaround time on those could be relatively quickly, you know, maybe another 4 to 6 weeks. So definitely in the next, our goal is to get the low-hanging fruit in the next few months when kids aren't yet back in school, so that when they do come back to school, some of these new filters will already be in place.
Thanks, Jamie. I see 2 hands, Ivanka and then Lisa.
Thanks, Jamie. This is kind of a basic question that I've been asking since the beginning of this measure is, do we have enough funds? Because filters is not the same as saying systems. So do we have enough 617 funds that can cover a certain amount of necessary HVAC replacement, repair, upgrades? Or is it really to the number just enough for filters?
It's going to all depend on how it kind of falls out. So if we get, you know, if we get lots of schools that can put filters in, filters are much cheaper. So we might have an opportunity to do some, I believe, and Todd maybe needs to chime in here because I can't 100% remember. I think in the existing guidelines, it's filters, Jess may remember as well. Filters, I do think they list in school filtrate, like in a classroom, like a
standalone unit.
Yes, standalone unit. And I forget what the third, is there a third category in there? I don't have it right in front of me.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I think for those schools that can't do the filters, the next step is to get standalone units in the classrooms, I believe. And in some cases, it may be multiple standalone units in classrooms. The budgeted amount, I don't have in front of me, but I'll look it up real quick. For this item, you know, off the top of your head?
1.5 million, and that was basically an amount that was enough to cover, I think, 55 schools. So I think that was the total number of schools within the community. So, and I believe that was anticipating doing primarily just the filter replacements. So.
And I do know in the resolution we had the right to adjust that funding amount. because that was one of our biggest concerns going into the adoption of this CERT, was that 1.5 million is enough for filters, but we knew that some of these schools are so old and rickety that their systems would have to be upgraded. Now the 55 schools, are those 55 schools within the 617 boundary alone, or is that for, that's just within, right?
That's just within the AB 617 boundary. And I will also tell you that it is just public schools. Private schools, per state law, can't get this funding. So we all learned that recently.
I think, Ivanka, you bring up some great points, and that's definitely what you brought up about the resolution is absolutely correct. And I think these are all really important topics that we're going to need to discuss as part of those subcommittee meetings, and then when we bring it back to the larger committee as a whole. And so, yeah, we're absolutely looking forward to have those conversations with everybody.
I'm seeing questions from Lisa and Bill. Do you have quick questions, Lisa and Bill? Lisa first.
Yes, I do. Got a real quick question. Nice to see that you're finally getting around to doing a needs assessment survey. However, you know, these schools typically have an annual maintenance plan. And so getting that information should be a real easy get once you get to the right person. So I would continue to hunt these people down and tell them that you're here to help them. Also too, I like Venice's comments about working in conjunction with CARES, because if you think about it, you guys are going to go for the lowest hanging fruit so you can like check off something very easy on your milestones, which is great. But in this age of COVID and trying to make sure the littles, as I call kids, get back to school and that they're safe and that the air is filtered the way it needs to be filtered to, you know, also help out stopping the pandemic spread that is COVID, we need to look at also, are we going to pick lowest hanging fruit or greatest need? And I think we should really seriously be looking at greatest needs and how could we leverage these funds in conjunction with CARES through the school districts to get everything up and running and get, you know, everybody on a win-win situation. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Lisa. Bill, close us out for this item if you wouldn't mind. And at this time also, before you go, Bill, I just want to make sure the Spanish language line, if you have any questions on this item, if you can queue those up for us, we'd love to make sure you get a chance to touch base with this item as well. Go ahead, Bill.
It may be a dumb question, but I was curious, what would it take to eliminate the cause of this bad air quality in these schools where they wouldn't need to have the filtration systems and so forth? Is that impossible? You know, and we've been talking about changing truck routes, that, you know, eliminating sources of pollution and so forth, rather than just filter the air. Is it possible to eliminate the causes of the air? I just don't know. It's just a simple question.
Definitely. I think you outlined a main purpose of AB 617 is to get those emissions reductions in the community. The thought with these types of measures is, in the meantime, as we're working through these things, and it takes time to get those reductions, we want, and what Lisa's saying, and I completely agree, we want action now, because we know that right now we still have that air pollution problem. And until we can continue to get those reductions that we need, we want to start protecting people. And so that's really sort of why we're kind of parallel process mitigation as well as emissions reductions.
So this is just a Band-Aid to help us out in the interim. Is that correct?
Sorry, I lost my cursor. Jamie, it looks like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'd refer to it as a Band-Aid. I mean, there are kids who you know, I think need this today, but yes, I mean, that's, as Jessica said, this is mitigation, and we also are focused on emission reduction.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. Thank you, Bill. I'm not seeing any more hands or Spanish language comments, and so I'll move you back to Jess. Did you want to do anything on air monitoring? Or Jamie?
We're going to have John do an air monitoring update.
Perfect.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Erica and Jess. I'll try to be brief here. I know we have some other topics to go through tonight, so I'm going to share my screen briefly here just so we can take a look at our air monitoring page for South Central Fresno. Just a few updates we wanted to give you tonight was that since the last time we talked about air monitoring, that was at our June meeting a couple of months ago, there's been a lot of activity in getting new air monitoring sites put up across the area, which is really exciting. You've probably seen this page before, but just wanted to point out to you, there's now some links here to look at PM 2.5 data for Heaton Elementary School. That's a new site that was established since our last meeting. Also, Yosemite Middle School has PM 2.5. So if you click on these here, you can see PM 2.5 live if you want to take a look at what's going on day by day. So that's now available. Over on the right-hand side, soon after those two sites were established, about in the middle of June, we were able to establish Malaga Elementary School. And this is going to be the most comprehensive air monitoring asset and site we'll have for the entire network for South Central Fresno. This is the full-size air monitoring trailer that's measuring PM 2.5, ozone, NOx, carbon monoxide, BTEX, black carbon, SO2, and then we're also doing our speciation work there for PM 2.5 and VOC. So that's now transitioned from our near road site at Fresno Foundry to Malaga Elementary, where we had planned to do that really comprehensive speciation work. So that's now all happening at Malaga Elementary since June. So we're really excited that that is now happening there. One other thing I wanted to point out here too that's new, in the middle of our page here for air monitoring for South Central Fresno, we have these weekly air monitoring updates that are available. I'm going to click on the most recent one here to give you an idea of what this is looking like. So what we're posting here is a way for you to see week by week just a snapshot of what's been happening. At the top of the report here, we list all the air monitoring sites that we have in our network here for the community. If it's green, saying in green and in place, that means the site is fully implemented. Our equipment is out there. We're monitoring 24/7. If it's still a white color, we're still working on those sites, but we are using the air monitoring van to take measurements in those areas near these locations. And so as we continue to make progress in implementing this network, we'll see more of these boxes turn green. So we're pretty close to having the entire network deployed for South Central Fresno. A little bit below that, we'll be having this chart showing PM 2.5 measurements for the week across all of the sites in the area. And we'll be comparing that against the federal 24-hour PM 2.5 standards. You can get a feel for how air quality was during that last week for what we're looking at for the time period. PM 2.5 being a really critical pollutant for the AB 617 program, we thought this would be a good view for everybody to see what happened during the last week. And just below that, there's going to be a few more pieces of information, specifically which days we took measurements for speciation for VOC and PM 2.5. For example, during this week on August 4th and 6th, we took VOC and PM 2.5 speciation samples at Malaga Elementary School, and those details will be available in reports later on. And then on the right, we have a listing of where we use the air monitoring van for the week. So on August 6th, we took some measurements near Orange Center School and Edison High School. Just below that, we'll have a few updates on where we are in implementing the rest of the network. And so there's just a few notes here on the work that we're continuing to do to deploy equipment at Madison Elementary School, Edison High School, and then Orange Center School. And there may be some other updates as new sites come online. So this is available. You can look through here as you want to. If you want to look at past weeks, that's also available. If you click on View Archive, you can look at all the different past weekly updates, and we'll continue to post these week by week. So if you want to track what's happening on a regular basis, feel free to jump on this website and track what's happening with air monitoring in South Central Fresno. And down here, as you've seen before, this is our community air monitoring plan that we put together a year ago. To the right of there will be our more comprehensive air monitoring reports. We went over this a few months ago. This is where we will post our quarterly reports that show more comprehensive analysis of the data we're collecting. And then to the right of there are any presentations that we give to the committee here on air monitoring. We'll post those here for your reference as well. So that's a quick update on where we are with the page and all the work that we're doing. A few other points we wanted to make, and let me bring up this screen. One of the sites that we're continuing to try to implement is putting equipment at Orange Center Elementary School. We brought up a few times some of the challenges we've had in getting that site established. We did have an offer from Keith Lowen, who's actually on the call today, which is great. Thanks, Keith, for being here. He's with Washington Unified School District, and he offered that at West Fresno Elementary School, which is just about 1 mile northwest of Orange Center School. He offered if some equipment could be placed here for the AB 617 process. And so something we wanted to ask the committee here was, would there be support from the committee where instead of putting the equipment at Orange Center School, we could, as an alternative, place it here at West Fresno Elementary School to continue to try to collect more air monitoring data from the Southwest Fresno area. So that's one question we're hoping to get a little bit of feedback from you on here tonight. The other question we had was, here's Madison Elementary School over on the west side of the community boundary. We're having challenges, and it's taking time to work with Central Unified School District to get the agreement in place for monitoring here. So if you have any thoughts now on where else we could work on placing air monitoring equipment in this area, we'd love to hear that feedback. And if you have thoughts later, feel free to give us a call, shoot us an email, let us know what you think, and we'll look at some alternative locations for Madison Elementary. So the two questions we have now are just Madison Elementary. Any thoughts there on different locations? And then the specific question here for Orange Center Elementary School with possibly placing that equipment at West Fresno Elementary School. And that's it, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I do see two questions, and before we jump to those, I want to answer your questions if we can very quickly. Let's see if this actually works. If you all know how to use your reaction buttons that show thumbs up or clap, if you like the idea of putting the monitoring station at the West Fresno Elementary School, can you go ahead and put the thumbs up and the clap there? We still will have a couple of times for questions. Looks like we've got some thumbs up. I'm seeing at least quite a few thumbs up there. If you've got any significant concerns with that, please drop something into the chat and we will try and call on you in between questions. Right now, I'm seeing quite a few thumbs ups, and I want to go to Bill and then Lisa for questions on this item.
I also have my hand raised, Erika. Can you see it?
You went down. I saw you at first, Naimeen. Actually, Naimeen, you were first, and then for some reason your hand went down. So do you want to go first?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions. So John, you mentioned that in Malaga you were doing speciation of some toxic air contaminants, and as we know, that data cannot be, real time like PM. So where would that data be displayed, or if it's already been displayed somewhere in the website that you showed us? So that's one thing, and how often those results are going to be updated. And then the other question is, now that you were showing us this map, and especially, more to the west, when you were showing us the other location, one of the things that we have also asked since we put together the air monitoring plan was a concern about pesticides. That was an issue for residents in West Fresno, and that was never addressed. And now that I saw again the fields that are more or less where you show us, I had that question still pending. Is it still possible to add some monitoring for pesticides, in that area in particular?
Great, thanks, Naimeen. Yeah, just to quickly answer your questions, for the PM 2.5 and VOC speciation work we're doing at Malaga Elementary School, those are samples that we collect and they get sent to a laboratory, and so that sort of data can't be shown in real time. So because it requires laboratory analysis, we get the reports back from the laboratory once they're done with that, and then we work on going through that, compiling that, and we're planning to put those in our quarterly reports that we can give to the committee. So we went over some of those results a couple of months ago from some of the initial work. We'll continue to do that once a quarter to give the committee an update on all the toxic speciation work that we've been doing. So that's our plan for that. For the pesticides work, I think what we're working on doing is having DPR come and give an update to this committee, because there have been comments and concerns about pesticides here in South Central Fresno, not just Shafter. And so I think if they're able to come soon and give an update to the committee on the work that they're doing across California and in the Valley, we can talk with them about your thoughts about air monitoring of pesticides in the area and see how they can respond and what they can do. So I think that's something we can address with them and have them come and talk about that at a meeting in the future pretty soon.
Great, thank you. I see, Bill, can you ask a very quick question, and Lisa, a quick question as well?
Yes,
Bill
this
first?
is Bill. This may be a silly question, but I was curious, would there be a problem in maybe asking to put a air monitoring like Amazon or one of those places in that locale where not too far from the school district to get information on the pollution? Have we tried to ask Amazon or Alta or any of those large complexes if you could put monitoring devices at their locations?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We have reached out to some of those facilities, Amazon, seeing if they could work with us, and we haven't had a lot of luck at this point in getting something set up, but we've thought about trying to get some monitoring in those areas. So if the committee has some thoughts there, we'd love to hear some other thoughts on different locations near Orange Center that could work. But yeah, we've reached out to some of those areas to see what could work, but nothing has seemed really easy at this point.
Well, it sounds like it's not easy at the school either. So I was just curious, maybe they'd be closer to some of the sources to put air monitoring equipment closer to some of these problematic sources that you're thinking of.
Right, and I mean, just thinking about it, if we're able to do it at West Fresno Elementary, that would give us an opportunity to get some more equipment out there in the near term to get some measurements in the Southwest Fresno area. And then later down the road, if we're able to work something out with Orange Center Elementary School or another location nearby, we can always shift that equipment over. It's not set in stone. This is equipment that could be moved around pretty easily. So that's an approach we can take to get some monitoring set up and then move it later to another location that the committee feels like makes more sense.
Because what I understand, Amazon's, seems to be kind of conscious of buying more equipment that's near zero or whatever, in the future. So I was curious if they would be interested in, helping with the pollution aspects of their site, by having monitoring equipment nearby.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Thank you. We have two more questions, and I want to make sure that you guys know we are into our other agenda item topics, so we're going to squeeze that one a little shorter just to make sure you end on time. So we will take these questions and others from the Spanish line, and then we'll move on to the measures tracker. So Lisa, quick question from you.
Yes. A couple of months ago, I requested you guys to do some air monitoring out by Roding Park, specifically in the area of H and Belmont. I found a resident for you to actually go and use her property. She agreed to it to measure the air quality in the area. And I'm just wondering, was that done, especially since the Producers Dairy EIR just came out?
Thanks, Lisa. I'll have to check with the team. I know we've done a lot of monitoring in the area with our air monitoring van. I don't know if you've made it out there specifically yet. I'll check with the team, but I made that note here, and we can go out there and try to take some measurements near that area. We'll look back at the suggestion of that exact address that you provided, and we'll see what we can do out there.
Yeah, because I gave you a name and a phone number and a contact, and she was really looking forward to your phone call. So I need to know if that phone call was made. So if you could call me tomorrow, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And then Ivanka, close us out. But before you do, anyone else has any questions or comments on this topic, please drop them in the chat. It's very active, and we are tracking that, and the Air District is responding. So go right ahead.
Thanks, Erica. This is actually back to what Bill was just discussing about asking for industry in the area to mitigate their pollution by having monitors on their building. Right now, the South Central specific plan which is this 617 area, is being looked at by our mayor. I know that Jamie, you had attended early on one of the community meetings that Jennifer Clark and the city were putting on for this. But when I'm saying they're in the process, they're really trying to finish this up while we have Mayor Lee Brand involved. And the ability to say, as part of the overlays in the development, could leave an opportunity if it was heard from the district. Because, us EJ folks don't get as far sometimes without a fight. But if you could actually state that should be a requirement for new development, that with the new development, if you are going to fall into these overlays of buffers, that you require require that there be air monitors as part of the development agreement. And I just think when we're talking about being on board and pushing for the same things, if we can have the air district in those spaces like that, those are the little actions that could make a big difference like this.
Thanks, Ivanka.
Thanks, Ivanka. And I do see a lot of comments in the chat, and I just want to give our Spanish language participants one chance. And Imari, I know you've done some translation. Is there one specific comment that you think resonates with those on the Spanish line before we move on to our measures tracker?
Yeah, I'm trying to get caught up, but it sounds like I was just going to include this, that Lilia has sent me a video that she wants to share about UPS or Amazon facility. I'm sorry, the Amazon facility that I will share with their district officials later on this evening. And then also I'm just getting a comment from Estella about why aren't we talking about the school buses at this point? Because I think that was on the agenda and it sounds like we're moving on to the next item. So she wants to know if we're going to get an update on that.
May I just say really quick in regards to Lilia's comment, in addition of you sending the video, Mari, what is more important is that I think her concern is very valid. She's concerned all the traffic that is being generated in this new, it's just to verify that everybody's on the same page. It's not that big, this warehouse that is on Central. She's talking about the new parking space that they have on Cedar and Church. So she said that there's, first and foremost, there was a community meeting where the city lied to their teeth and said that that was not going to be but like an office. And now it's one of those parkings where they have their blue vans going in and out all the time, generating a lot of traffic. So I think that her concern is really valid. And I think we should consider putting one of the vans that go around in different places, monitoring that site.
Thanks, Diamine. Okay, so we will look for that video and...
Excuse me, is it possible for us to see the video that Lilia sent? I think that'd be very important to give us a visual of what's going on in that neighborhood or what she sent instead of, I mean, this is our meeting. It doesn't matter if we go over time, but I think it's very important that all CSC members are heard and that her video is shown.
She shared it with me on my cell phone. I don't know how I can share that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
But I totally agree, Kimberly. This is your meeting, and that's why I've been trying not to cut people off. We're way over time on the agenda item, but I know you all have so many important feedback items to add to this. And I think that we hopefully won't go too far over. We're going to try and make it up, but I appreciate and agree. This is your meeting. We want to make sure you feel heard. And I think what we heard is that the video will be shared with the district and I think if possible with the CSC as well. Okay, moving on. I don't see any other comments or questions. We'll answer anything else in the chat. I'm really, really grateful to you all for just giving us the flexibility to take a little thing, some things a little longer than we were planning to. And the next agenda item is actually going to be about a measures tracker. So we're going to take it a little shorter. I mean, if you are available to stay longer, we will. We'll keep going, I think, if we can, but we'll try and stay on time. And we want to talk to you about how we're going to track our measures moving forward. The district actually has done a lot of work on implementation. And I know during these meetings, like we're seeing right now, there's just not enough time to talk about everything. And so they've created a tracker that it's an online tool to really be able to track the status of each CERT measure and see the work that's been done and the work that's in progress. So we want to spend a little time today showing you the tool, getting your thoughts on it. I want to make sure our Spanish speakers too can follow along, and they should have received a paper version of this tracker that they can follow along with on their paper copies, and then we'll leave some time to answer questions we have on that. So Jessica is going to give this update, and committee members, as you listen to what she's saying and see what she puts on the screen, please think about if this tracking system makes sense to you, if there's anything that can be modified, what you need to make it user-friendly, and then we're going to hear from Jessica and then potentially from CARB as well about their approach to tracking. So Jess, it is all yours. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. And yes, it's certainly going to be a bit of a tag team effort. So thank you for that introduction. So as Erica mentioned, we not only sent a Spanish version or hard copy version of the tracker so that you can follow along, because we understand it is difficult when we're sharing the screen to kind of look at what we're sharing and then have something else up separately. But the way you can access the tracker from anywhere is here at our typical South Central Fresno AB 617 webpage. We have a tracker track South Central Fresno progress. We have the Spanish and the English version up. And when you click on this, as you zoom in, and there's a lot of information on here, you will see that we have listed by category type, or by measure type rather, whether it's an ag measure or a community-based measure, something related to heavy-duty mobile sources. We have every measure, the measure number, the description as it stands in the SERP, the details, at least as they're written in the SERP now, although to Ivanka's point earlier, obviously a lot of these details can kind of be worked out and amended, especially funding amounts as we move forward implementing these. And then status updates. So what we've done here and what we will promise to continue to do, and we certainly have a lot of updates even after this meeting today, is to track the status of where we're at with every single measure, what the district is doing, what the committee has committed to do to help sort of be partners in some of these measures, or what other agencies are doing depending on the type of measure. So as you go through, this is definitely not, we're not going to go, even if we had the full hour, our intention was not to go measure by measure today, but to sort of let you know what this is intended for, and to let you know sort of in general what we're thinking moving forward for tracking a lot of these measures. As you know, we try to bring, based on community input, certain topics to committee meetings so we can talk about the details of those topics. But obviously we don't have time, even as we learned today, to talk about everything every time. So as we move forward with the direction that we've been given from the committee, we want to continue to let you know where we're at with those measures. So an example, if you scroll down, you can see all of these heavy duty mobile measures, and you'll notice a lot of the incentive measures. As you come across the status update, you'll talk a lot about what you've heard a lot about from Todd about the CARB's draft community air protection program incentives guidelines. And so we wanted to make sure not only do you have a summary of recent times we've talked about this, but I'll pass it to Todd to talk a little bit more about how not only will we be tracking progress, but also helping track the progress that we're making with CARB on some of those funding discussions. So I'll pass it to Todd right now.
Thank you, Jess. So yeah, just to sort of tee off what Jessica was talking about, as we've talked about in previous meetings, the funding that's associated with a lot of these CERT measures obviously comes from the state and is subject to the Community Air Protection Program guidelines. Those guidelines were written to include a variety of different projects. They're traditionally sort of the projects that you might find in some of the existing state programs. Interestingly, our SERP, your SERP, includes a lot of different measures that aren't included in those guidelines. And so CARB has come up with a process for us to take these CERP measures that don't really fit into the traditional mold. They've given us a process to get those approved for funding using the Community Air Protection Funds. It's called Chapter 6 of the CAP guidelines, and we've been working with CARB over the past year or so to finalize the guidelines in Chapter 6 and to start using those. We were actually the very first ones in the state to submit a measure to CARB under Chapter 6, and I really think some congratulations is in order to this committee for actually thinking outside the box and coming up with such innovative CERP measures, so many of them that we actually have to take through this process. So it's really it's kudos to you for sort of thinking outside the box and thinking past those traditional sorts of projects that a lot of you have seen over the years come out of the air districts. So the first one that we're taking through this process is obviously the truck rerouting study, top of mind with everybody, top of everybody's list in terms of moving forward. So in addition to all the good work that's going on with the RFP development, we're working on the funding piece, getting funding for this truck rerouting study to be approvable under the Community Air Protection guidelines. And then, we can use those funds for this project. We submitted that truck rerouting study. We call it a project plan. We submitted that to CARB back in June, and we've been working with CARB since June to get it approved. And you know, we've been in contact with them just about every week and having multiple meetings on sort of setting this up. And again, it was the first one that was submitted in the entire state. So we're all kind of learning through this process together. We think we're very close, and CARB is committed that it could be approved within the next couple of weeks. So that works with the timeline, you know, with everything else that's being developed for the project. So I don't think we'll be any, you know, I don't think we'll have any delays on our end in terms of the funding. But we are working with them on that. So at this point, basically the floodgates are open, and we've got about a dozen other CERT measures that we're preparing project plans for right now. Those include obviously the priorities that were of highest, or the measures that were of highest priority to this committee based on a lot of the prioritization exercises that we've gone through over the last several months. And just give you a brief synopsis of some of the ones that we're actively working on. The residential and commercial lawn and garden replacement programs, those were very high on the priority list. The wood burning, our burn cleaner program, providing incentives for folks to change out their open hearth fireplaces to clean burning natural gas is one that's high on our list and we're working on. A heavy duty truck replacement with zero and near zero emission equipment, heavy duty yard trucks. We've prioritized the tune-in, tune-up program. You had expressed a desire to have some focused outreach and significant effort in the tune-in, tune-up program for vehicle smog repairs, with some focused outreach and some focused events that occur within the 617 community. So we're working on that as well. And quite a few other measures. Like I say, we've got about a dozen that are underway right now, and we're submitting those to CARB. And then we're working very quickly to get those approved. Once we submit those to CARB in their draft form, it's a very iterative process with CARB. We're also going to be notifying this committee. We're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to be posting them on the website on your specific community page so that you'll be able to see those. And you'll also get notified by email as soon as those are submitted to CARB. And so you'll have the opportunity to look at those and provide us comments as we go through this iterative process with CARB to get these measures approved. Right now, the measures are being written up basically as described in the CERP, but you know, it is an iterative process, and these things can be changed and amended during that review process with CARB. And so they'll also be translated into Spanish, and both the English and Spanish versions will be included on the website. And again, we'll be inviting comments on all of these different project plans that we're submitting to CARB. So a lot of information, I know, but that's my quick update for you.
Thank you, Todd. Do we have questions for Jess or Todd specifically about their tracker, or about the updates he's provided about Chapter 6 or anything else? If you do have questions, your options are the same. You can raise your hand with *9, or you can drop them into the chat. I see a question from Lisa.
Well, it's more a statement. I got the information in hard copy, and you guys, I just got new glasses. I just got new reading glasses. And I can't read this stuff because it's so small. And I just go back to the format of this information. You know, months ago I said, you know, I would love to see it in a Gantt chart format where you have the end and the start date for all these major activities, where you could tell us where you're going through the typical planning milestones. And since you can put it on your website, you could actually have hyperlinks to jump to, here's the information, here are the status updates, and have it an ongoing rolling status update so we can read actually what it is. Because right now, I can tell you, thank you very much for bringing this over, but I can't read it. It's not really community friendly, is what I'm trying to say. So
Thank you, Lisa. No, that's definitely great feedback. And I think as we move forward, as we develop a lot of what Todd just talked about too, and we have even more sort of time frames and deadlines associated with these measures, something like a timeline or a Gantt chart makes a lot of sense. So I really appreciate that feedback. We'll definitely continue to develop this and make it much easier, but with still a lot of that information that I think we want to make sure everyone is privy to.
Thank you for that. And all of those of you that are listening, this is the kind of feedback the district wants. How's the presentation? How can you stay better informed? How can you feel like you know what's going on, even if we can't touch everything in every single meeting? How can you quickly go online and say, here's where we are on this. This is the progress that's being made. Any comments, drop them into the chat or raise your blue hand before we move on to a CARB update. Ivanka, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I think or thanks, Jessica. I'm sorry. I was wondering about these updates. Are they going to, is this the main status update that we're going to be presenting to CARB? And if so, is that including the information about the resolution updates?
You, I think, helped us transition very nicely to what I think our next part of this is going to be, is actually looking to CARB to talk a little bit about not only, you know, progress tracking from, you know, you'll notice none of these are not CARB measures on here, but then also moving forward, that update to the board, and especially in September, I know you all have questions about. So I believe Vernon can help answer that.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So yeah, on the tracker, we're all learning here, I think, as the Valley team mentioned. So we're really interested in hearing your feedback, comments like Lisa made on making a tracker useful. So we are also working on a tracking type tool, and you may recall at the last CSC meeting, there was just a quick update, couple of slides on statewide measures. So within your emission reduction program, there's statewide CARB-based measures that are in there, as well as the measures that are specific to your community emission reduction program. So we're also working on a tracker. Again, we're listening to feedback. The Valley is one of the first communities out, looking at this kind of tracker. So we're looking at feedback from the variety of CSCs to come up with a format that really makes sense and that's useful. So on the update, our board is really looking forward to an update on the first year communities that have CERPs. So there's 7 communities with emission reduction programs. And so looking at September, there are 2 board hearings, CARB board hearings. One is on the 24th of September, and that's we'll have the update topic. The other one is of the 7 communities, you may or may not know this or recall this, 3 of them were in Southern California. So South Coast Air Quality Management District has 3 that have, due to COVID, we were really aspiring and hoping to actually be able to have meetings like you had for Shafter and Fresno in the community, but COVID just delayed that whole process. So anyways, their CERP approvals are happening September 10th. So we're looking at, in terms of the format, the structure of the hearing on the 24th, we've been in discussions with South Coast also on, they're going to be covering some of their community implementation status on the 10th. So on the 24th, we're looking at, for the communities in the other air districts, so in Imperial, San Joaquin, and Bay Area, having an update. So what we're going to be doing is reaching out to steering committee members and talking with the district, again, on the format that board update will take. And so stay tuned. That's actually happening. I think we reached out to some folks earlier this week, trying to touch base first with the steering committee members that were presenting with the district and CARB at the last board hearing. But anyways, again, working on format, of that meeting. Stay tuned. Currently scheduled for the 24th of September.
Thank you, Vernon. Okay, so I had a couple questions in the private chat, so I want to reiterate what you said and make sure I've got it right. So correct me if I'm wrong. On September 24th, there is a CARB board meeting. CARB staff are the ones providing this update on the AB 617 communities. At this time, it's not a written, like a huge written report, but it's potentially a verbal update or something, but CARB's going to decide what gets presented at that meeting. And that could include some of the measures tracker things that the Air District showed, but it might be other things you're going to check in with the CSC between now and in the next couple of weeks to help formulate what you need to report back at this board meeting for CARB on the 24th. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I mean, similar to the SERP approval board meeting of having the community, the district, and CARB all available in that report back. So we do want, I mean, this is the community's programs. We want to make sure that they're also involved in the report back, of course.
Great. So they will expect to hear from CARB about how to get engaged in that effort.
Right.
Thank you. I see questions from Ed Ward and then Naomi.
Thank you. One of the things that I think is going to be very critical for our success in these summaries is having a clearly defined way that we're going to present and that this committee is going to present an agreed upon progress piece. When we did talk to the board, that was one of the issues that was discussed, and certainly as we develop the mechanics for making this happen, I think we need to come up with a clear method. We're not all going to agree on everything, but when we go through the process, we want to make sure that it's done right and everyone's had their voice. So.
Yeah, thanks. And just to also clarify again, in October, there will be a report generated, right, on the status of each of the communities, and then there will be another report back in December. So the September meeting is really a touch base status of where things are in implementation, but there's further opportunity to look at exactly what you're saying. How does the community want to look at or develop a report on the status of the program? And that, you know, that will be compiled annually and produced in October timeframe.
So
Great. Thank you so much, Vernon.
Real quick, Ivanka, to answer your question about the tracking tool, what we put on the website is really just intended. It's a hopefully a simplified description of what all the work and effort that we're putting into the individual measures. As far as the annual report, that is actually going to be in a different format. It's going to have more of the breakdown. As we incentivize and get replacements of equipment, we'll have the ability to track the emission reductions in the community and get all that information. That's going to be in a larger report. And so what our goal is for September would be to bring that report, because we've heard that the desire of the committee to see what that report looks like before we ultimately post it in October and take it to our board in October before the going to CARB's board by the end of the year. So we definitely heard the steering committee, their desire to have more of an opportunity to look at that information and have a discussion on it. So that's what we're looking to do.
Thanks, Ryan. So 2 different opportunities, 2 different meetings. The first one is on the 24th with CARB, and CARB is leading that reporting effort, and then a separate one that'll come to the September CSC meeting where we'll start to see a draft of the report that the Air District has to present to CARB later in the year. So this committee will have plenty of opportunity to weigh in on that written report. And it sounds like you'll even have an opportunity to provide some input on the CARB report that's going to their board in September as well. I see Naomi's hand, and then we will move on. Naomi.
Yes, so it's completely linked to the discussion right now. I know that we had talked with some of the CARSTAR members, and we have suggested, well, it was suggested since the chapter meeting about a template so that all the air districts have this model to follow. And I know that it was in the make, but I don't know what's the status of that and is that going to be ready for when these reports are going to be presented.
Yeah, so we have been working with the districts on exchanging, basically coming up with a data exchange template. And that is something, once we finalize the form of that template, that's something that we plan on posting. So, and it will be a consistent form of a template across the communities that you could actually look at these communities or other communities and compare. There will be, each community is different. There's different strategies, so there will be some differences, but we're really striving to, that was a great suggestion at the board meeting. So we're really striving to hit the mark on that. Really, really useful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naimeen. Thanks, Vernon. Any more questions? What about from our Spanish speakers? Do we have anything on the Spanish line related to this topic?
I have nothing on the Spanish conference line.
Thank you, Amelia. And we've got some great activity going on in the chat. It looks like we have more clarification about the annual report, the deadlines there, the written process. So I think we've gotten some clarity on the two distinct opportunities you have to weigh in, one to CARB and one to the Air District, different timelines, but definitely want to have CSC committee input on, it sounds like both of them, and you'll hear from different stakeholders about how to get that done. So thank you for that offer and thank you for the feedback and guidance you've given so far on those items. So believe it or not, guys, we actually got back on schedule. So we're doing fine with our time. Everybody did a fantastic job. Thank you for letting us kind of ramrod you through the schedule to try and stay on time. And I appreciate those of you that dropped things into chat and maybe even took your comments down a little bit. But I don't want to dispel anyone or discourage anyone from making sure they got to say what they wanted to say. Are there any comments on any of the items we've talked about so far in this meeting? Anybody want to say anything else to make sure you got heard? If you felt like you didn't have time, now's a great time to raise your hand and just bring that up now.
Yes, I was mentioning the truck. This is Laura Rosenberger. I mentioned the truck idling in Malaga, like in the nights there when the Rio Bravo was really bad and there's a smoke trail coming across. There's people sitting in their trucks waiting for something or taking their break and idling the truck. And at the same time, then the neighbors they're sleeping nearby, like a block or two away. Sometimes the wind is going that direction toward the community, people's homes, and the AQI is like 100 or sometimes over 100 micrograms per meter. No, AQI actually is 100 at night sometimes. For PM 2.5, AQI is 100. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. We have heard it. It has been captured. And is there any comment from the Air District or CARB on that, or will we follow back up and address it at another time?
Yeah.
Great.
Just
Okay, thank you.
Quick, I'm sorry, just real quick. Just appreciate that from Laura, and a lot of the air monitoring work that we'll be doing at Malaga Elementary will help kind of discern what impacts there could be going on down in that area. So thanks for that, Laura.
Yeah, and this is Vernon Hughes. I'm sure there's folks from CARB's enforcement team on the line that have heard you, and so yeah, it's something that we'll follow up on as well.
Thank you both, and thank you, Laura. All right, I don't see any more hands. I don't see any more unmutes. I don't see any more comments. So let's move into the last part of our meeting. And again, this has been so productive. I think there's a lot of really amazing notes that we have and a lot of dialogue that's been had. So let's move to wrap up. And I see that Ed is back on the line. Thank you for that. So one of the things Ed and I definitely wanted to do is make sure that we have a running list of topics for discussion for future meetings so we can think about what those are, make sure that we have enough time to discuss them. So if Ed would like to talk a little bit about some of the things that you'd like to see so we can take some copious notes. What would you like to see in the next couple of meetings? When we want to make sure we map out the timelines for the next few months and make sure that what is important to you gets covered. This is your meeting, this is your CSC. how do we address the things that are of interest to you and give you enough time to talk about those things?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Erica. I want to thank committee members. I really do believe that, you know, we've been at this now for quite a while. We have air information that we can begin to look at the whys and the hows and the how to fixes. I'm particularly interested in the vegetative barriers. I'm interested enough that I believe that it's probably worthwhile to go to the legislature. This year it's too late, but go to the legislature and say to Caltrans, you're not going to build any main highways that don't have vegetative barriers or some sort of barrier walls. And as I drive around and I do a lot of traveling, I see a lot of these vegetative barriers. And actually on the way up to Cloverdale this last round, I saw many block walls. And in fact, in Stockton, there's some 12-foot block walls. I don't know how efficient those are in reducing traffic emissions, but that would be something that we might want to learn about ultimately. But I'm a single individual looking to help solve community issues. It's important that the community members also have a say in this. So I would ask, are there other issues? I mean, we've talked about the truck transportation routing, that could have a significant difference. Do others have priorities that they feel we should bring to the table for our next meeting?
Please feel free to drop your comments or questions in the chat or suggestions for agenda items in the chat. And I also see Ivanka has a hand raised. Ivanka, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I really want to, I don't know if everyone on this committee even had the opportunity to review what the resolution said from February. And I just don't want to let that go because some of those resolutions were really important priorities of the community that leading up to the approval of the CERT weren't included. So that's why I keep coming back to that. One of those is, it's partially question and partially just bring awareness. Do we have anything in writing we had asked for? And one of the CERT things is to make sure that there's not just conversation with the city or county or Caltrans agencies, but that there is some form of something in writing that this committee can actually see moving forward, what those agreements are. And even though the South Central specific plan is in nowhere even heard of in this CERT, we might have little people know about the Southwest specific plan. That South Central specific plan is doing complete opposite of what we're trying to accomplish here in 617, because it's an area that is overburdened. That's why we're here at this table. Yet we have a city that wants to continue with economic development and do the bare minimum of mitigation of barriers, vegetative barriers, all those things. So we need to kind of concentrate on what exactly was that MOU, how are we moving forward with the city as that was part of the resolution. So that needs to be on the table soon.
Yeah, and to just respond to Ivanka, that is something that we're looking to put together. Ultimately, what we'll end up doing is bringing kind of what a framework would look like, similar to what was discussed as far as the truck reroute, bringing it back to the committee, getting the input from the committee on things that could potentially be included in an MOU or some administrative process with the city and the county. So that's something that we are working on and that we would, like I said, would bring back to the committee for their input on.
Thanks, Ryan. And I know that we also talked about bringing Tree Fresno back because there was a lot of conversation at that last meeting and there's a lot of interest in that program. So that certainly ties in with that conversation. Additional items, please continue to drop those into the chat. And Lisa, if you wouldn't mind, take us out on this agenda item.
First, a couple of things. Ed, when you see 12-foot high cinder block walls along the freeway, it is not beautification. What it is it's sound wall. They're mandated down the sound, yeah. So vegetation probably would not work because it would have to buy out so many homes to make a sound barrier. Second, if we're going to bring back Tree Fresno, can we finally, I've been asking and asking until I'm blue in the face like I'm some friggin' Smurf, for the Air District staff to look up Centennial Highway down in Bakersfield and how they did their greening, because they did tree planting, and they had some innovative things that Caltrans did with social justice, not social justice, environmental justice, as far as greening not only the freeway, but also the community around the freeway. And it's something that we could learn from. And I asked about it back in February, and I keep getting nobody responding. And I really would like someone to respond and look at that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. What about our Spanish language line? Any last comments on this item? And there's always obviously an opportunity to email the district at any time about these things and/or share with your fellow committee members.
Hey, real quick, Erica, before we transition, because one of the comments that one of our Spanish language speakers had brought up was the question about school buses and where that was, and it wasn't addressed in the standing updates, and wanted to make sure that she understood that we did hear her question, and that what we're looking to do is bring that back to the subcommittee, discussing ways in which we can approach school districts. We've definitely engaged with all the different school districts, trying to encourage them to take the opportunity to participate in the electrification of their school buses to varying degrees of success. You know, we've had a lot of success in, for example, in Fowler with replacing something like 9 school buses with electric buses. But at the same time, we're not seeing as much movement in some of the other districts. And I know some of the steering committee members have shared with us that they have relationships with people on in various levels of the school districts and can be an assistance with us. And that's definitely what we're looking to capitalize on and learn from those committee steering committee members and other members of this committee. So yeah, we're definitely motivated and want to see more school buses being converted to electric. So thanks for bringing that up and reminding us to discuss that.
Thank you, Ryan.
Just really quickly, I'd like to mention I don't have any Spanish speakers on the conference line.
Thank you, Amelia. Fantastic. I think we have completed that agenda item, and I just want to make sure that we give enough time. I think we heard one public comment. Are there any other public comments before we move to the wrap up? Does not look like there's any on Facebook or email. Excellent. Okay. Well, with that in mind, we just want to thank Ed for being a fantastic community co-host. He is really, you know, definitely taken a lion's share in this meeting. If you would like to volunteer to be a community co-host moving forward, please raise your hand now, unmute yourself, or type your name in the chat box, and we'll put you in the queue for a future co-hosting opportunity. And as always, you can email the district directly as well. And feel free to do that anytime while we're wrapping up the meeting. I want to make sure there's still no comments on the public side. Any other volunteers?
And Erica, maybe sorry if you were getting to this already. I didn't look at the detailed about the next meeting date.
Yeah, I'm getting to that next, and then we're done. So again, feel free to email, and we will make sure that you get added to one of the future meetings. So the last thing is a housekeeping note that Jess was going to bring up, but I can do it for you. You know, honestly, it's that the next meeting date actually coincides with the Transformative Climate Communities, or TCC, meeting on September 9th. So the Air District's actually going to send out a doodle poll to identify some alternate dates for that meeting, so there's no conflict. You don't have to choose between the two. So if you wouldn't mind, look out for an email from the district, reply with your availability for a new meeting time, so it will not be as scheduled on September 9th. And we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to participate in TCC if they need to, and in the CSC meeting as well. with that, I want to ask the Air District if there's anything else you guys want to cover. Otherwise, amazingly, we are ending right on time. Excellent. Any other comments from the CSC? Oh, Ivanka, thank you. And then again, feel free to drop into the chat. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for your time, your attention, your flexibility while we move things around. And we just got a lot of incredible feedback. We are so looking forward to following up with you on it. And again, you guys are doing really, really great work. This committee should be proud of the progress that you've made. We feel really good about some of the things you talked about today, and I feel like there's a lot of momentum. So thank you for letting us be a part of it, and we are grateful for all of your contributions, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Yeah,
thanks,
great
guys.
meeting, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye.